The tire tracks appeared again that morning, cutting straight across the ranch road like someone had drawn a line through years of hard work. But this time, Daniel Harper wasn't just going to fix the gate and pretend nothing happened, because the person ignoring that gate believed the rules of the neighborhood didn't apply to her, and what Daniel planned next would make the entire community stop and watch. Daniel's ranch sat at the very edge of the Pine Ridge Estates HOA. His property had been there long before the new luxury homes and manicured lawns appeared nearby. Acres of quiet land stretched behind a wooden gate that Daniel had built himself years earlier. Most neighbors respected the boundary. But one person didn't. Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, had discovered that the dirt road running through Daniel's ranch created a shortcut between two streets in the neighborhood. Instead of driving the long paved route around the hills, she simply opened the ranch gate and drove straight through. At first, Daniel thought it was a mistake. He politely asked her not to use the road again. Karen smiled, nodded, and drove through again the very next day. Then the tire tracks kept appearing. Week after week, Daniel repaired the gate twice. Each time, Karen treated it like a suggestion instead of a boundary. What she didn't realize was that Daniel had spent most of his life building things that were meant to last. And if she refused to respect a gate, he would simply build something she couldn't ignore. The next morning, Daniel walked the property line with quiet determination. The ranch gate stood slightly crooked again, the latch forced open just enough for a vehicle to slip through. It wasn't broken, but it had clearly been pushed aside. Daniel ran his hand along the wood inside. He knew exactly who had done it. Karen's silver SUV had become a familiar sight on the dirt path cutting across the ranch. From her perspective, it was simply the fastest way home. From Daniel's perspective, it was trespassing. That afternoon, he drove into town and stopped at the local hardware supplier. By the time he returned, a trailer full of materials followed behind his truck: heavy posts, stone blocks, concrete mix. Neighbors driving past the ranch entrance slowed down to watch. Because Daniel wasn't repairing the gate this time, he was measuring the ground on both sides of the entrance, carefully, deliberately. By sunset, the first steel post stood firmly in the soil. Karen noticed the construction while driving through the neighborhood later that evening. She slowed her car, staring at the growing structure near the ranch road. Then she smiled to herself, too. Karen, it probably looked like another small fence, something she could easily move around. But Daniel had already designed something much bigger, and once it was finished, that shortcut would disappear forever. Construction continued the entire week. Each morning, Daniel worked quietly beside the ranch entrance while trucks delivered more stone and concrete. Neighbors began stopping to ask questions. Daniel always gave the same calm answer: he was improving the property line. Technically, he wasn't lying, but the structure rising beside the gate was far stronger than a normal fence. Large stone blocks formed the base. Steel beams reinforced the center. By midweek, the outline of a thick ranch wall had begun to take shape. Karen drove past twice that day. The first time she simply glanced at it, the second time she slowed down, because something about the wall looked permanent. Still, she continued using the dirt road. The shortcut had become part of her routine. She drove through the open gate again that evening, leaving another set of tire tracks across the ranch path. Daniel watched quietly from the barn as her SUV disappeared down the road. He didn't say a word. He simply returned to the construction site and continued working, because the wall wasn't finished yet. And the moment Karen discovered what it truly meant was getting closer every day. Saturday morning brought the final delivery. A flatbed truck rolled slowly toward the ranch entrance carrying massive stone panels designed to lock together like pieces of a fortress. Daniel directed the driver carefully. By noon, the entrance looked completely different. Where a simple wooden gate once stood, a solid stone barrier now stretched across the entire width of the ranch road. Only a single steel ranch gate remained in the center. But this time, the gate opened inward toward Daniel's land, not outward toward the neighborhood road, meaning it could only be unlocked from inside the ranch. Late that afternoon, Karen turned the corner in her SUV and headed toward her usual shortcut. But instead of an open path, she saw something unexpected. The new wall stood tall and immovable beside the road. Karen stopped the vehicle and stepped out slowly. She walked closer to inspect the structure. The gate handle sat on the ranch side of the barrier, completely out of reach. Daniel stood calmly on the other side. For the first time in weeks, Karen couldn't simply drive through. And the conversation that followed would finally settle the issue once and for all. Karen crossed her arms as she looked at the wall. She told Daniel that the road had always been accessible to the neighborhood. Daniel listened patiently, then he pointed toward the property markers placed along the ground. Every inch of that road sat inside his legal boundary. The HOA rules applied to the houses inside Pine Ridge Estates, but the ranch had been there long before the HOA existed. Karen insisted the shortcut was convenient for residents. Daniel nodded. Convenient? Maybe, but not permitted. He explained calmly that the new wall simply protected the property line that had always been there. Karen looked around the entrance again, realizing there was no simple way around it. The structure was too wide, too solid, too permanent. A few passing neighbors slowed their cars to watch the discussion. Karen finally returned to her SUV without another word. For the first time since discovering the shortcut, she drove the long route back through the neighborhood streets. But the real impact of Daniel's decision would appear during the next HOA meeting. Word about the ranch wall spread quickly through Pine Ridge Estates. At the next HOA meeting, several residents mentioned the situation. Some admitted they had used the shortcut before as well. Others pointed out that Daniel had every legal right to close his private road. The HOA board reviewed the property maps during the meeting. The documents confirmed exactly what Daniel had explained. The dirt road was never part of the HOA, it had always belonged to the ranch. Karen remained quiet for most of the discussion. Eventually, the board agreed that the community should respect the ranch boundary moving forward. The shortcut was simply gone. A week later, traffic patterns in the neighborhood returned to normal. Residents used the proper streets again, and the ranch entrance remained peaceful. But the wall standing beside that gate had become something more than just a barrier. It had become a reminder. Some boundaries exist for a reason, and ignoring them too many times can lead to consequences no one expects. Autumn arrived quietly at Pine Ridge Estates. Golden sunlight stretched across the ranch fields each evening as Daniel finished his work and closed the gate for the night. The stone wall stood strong beside the entrance, blending naturally with the landscape. Karen still lived in the neighborhood, but she never attempted to use the shortcut again. Instead, she drove the same streets as everyone else. Neighbors passing the ranch often slowed down to admire the craftsmanship of the wall Daniel had built. It looked less like a barrier and more like a landmark, a quiet symbol of the moment when someone decided to protect what belonged to them. Sometimes solving a problem doesn't require arguments or endless discussions. Sometimes the solution is simply building something strong enough that the problem disappears on its own, and in this case, one ranch wall managed to do exactly that, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.